Hey guys, welcome to What You Sippin' On, sponsored by B3 podcast here locally to Hendersonville, Middle Tennessee. We got the B3 group here, so we got Dennis Tolpa with Studio Bank. We have Eric Thornton with eXp Realty. I'm William Stiles with Country Financial. So anybody out there looking for a home or moving to the area, we have the three needs you have right here. So Dennis Tolpa with Studio Bank can do your mortgage. Eric Thornton can be your local realtor, and I can do all the insurance needs that you have here. We like to bring local business owners and leaders into our group. We have a monthly meeting every month. B3 gets together. But we also like to bring those individually into the podcast. So today we're going to talk with our Mayor of Hendersonville today, Mr. Jamie Clary, who has been mayor since 2016, reelected in 2020. And like we start every episode of What You Sippin' On, Mr. Mayor, what are you sipping on?
I like lemonade. And I pretty much just drink lemonade and water. I don't drink soft drinks. I don't drink beer. Don't drink liquor. I don't drink milk. I drink lemonade and water. And usually in the afternoons, it's lemonade.
Lemonade.
Yep.
So when we picked out lemonade, you specifically like Simply Lemonade. Is that right?
Yes. So I used to drink some other lemonade and found out that there are a lot of bad things in some lemonade. And Simply is a little bit healthier for you. I can tell you the restaurants, and I can rate the restaurants on which ones have the best lemonade, which ones don't. And also I'm a fan of strawberry lemonade occasionally.
I like me some strawberry lemonade too. I'm with you on that. All right.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us today. I know you have a very busy schedule. Let's talk a little bit about why you got into politics specifically. So going back, you got elected in 2016. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. But before that, you had been in politics a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. You'd been in business. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that first. Like, what kind of business were you doing? What was pre-mayor? What did that look like?
So I started out of college, and actually during college, working for a couple newspapers. And then after college, worked for the Hendersonville Star News and the Gallatin News Examiner for a couple years. And after that, went and worked I had interned in Washington, D.C. during college, and then went back and worked for a congressman there in D.C. Came back here, worked in another newspaper for a little while, and then was working on my own, doing freelance work, essentially running my own business. And so did that for a little while, and then sort of transitioned from there to more of community relations for a company for about 10 years, and then sort of thought about what is it that I want to do when I grow up. And I was certainly emotionally invested in Hendersonville. Owned a house in Hendersonville. My family was in Hendersonville, and I had served served as an alderman for 4 years as well. And thought, well, heck, as we got to 2015 and 2016 right around the corner, I thought, I want to be the person that makes the vital decisions for Hendersonville. And I don't think anybody who runs for office can be arrogance-free, and I had a little bit of arrogance about that. I think that's what you need to run.
Yeah, I give you a lot of credit because I've gone to a couple BOMA meetings, okay. and I look at the alderman, and I'm like, at what point does somebody like want to sit there and like take that? So I'm just curious, at what point in your career you're like, hey, like I go to this meeting and I want to sign up for that?
So my goal for a long time, when I first started in office, today, don't lose it. So, I mean, it's a very low bar, but today, don't lose it. And most days, I'm able to walk out of City Hall and have succeeded. That's really what I focus on. Is I have to put up with a lot of stuff, and some of it justified, some of it not. But I just do my best not to lose it. And the reason that that's such an important goal for me is because I don't want to end up on YouTube. I don't want to end up on CBS News. I don't want to end up making Hendersonville look bad.
Well, I mean, there's you have a servant heart, obviously, to serve the community that way, and everybody does in that fashion. But I was just always curious because I'm like, where I stand, I'm like, I would never do this. And I think a lot of people say that, and then at some point, something switches where they want to make a change. And was there something like that with you that you're like, hey, I want to make a change, so I'm going to kind of pursue this path?
There sort of was. And what happened was I had kids. And having grown up in Hendersonville, my mom's still here, my sisters are still nearby. It was always apparent to me how important it was for all of us kids to hang out with my mom and dad. We didn't do the traditional, Sunday dinner, that kind of thing, but we did spend a lot of time at their house. And then when I had kids, I sort of understood that a little bit more, that I want my kids to want to be around me for a long, long time. At the same time, the world is changing, and this is even pre-COVID, that people could pretty much work wherever they wanted to. And knowing that 20 years after that kid is born, they don't have the opportunity to live anywhere in the world they want to. And so I thought, well, if I'm really serious about my kids staying here and staying near me, I need to make Hendersonville an attractive place for them. And I feel like we were attractive, but I wanted to keep it that way and make it even more attractive, not just for them, but for possibly somebody who'd hire them and for their kids and for, for the community that we already had here.
So at the time when you were starting to see that mayor, like what were some of the things that stood out to you that you hoped you could have an impact on when you got into office?
So I really saw that our infrastructure was sort of declining in Hendersonville, and that bothered me a lot. Because I was hearing, and I was seeing that roads weren't getting paved as well as they should have, that I was just hearing some negative comments about the city. And you're always going to hear negative comments about the community because people just don't tend to share a whole lot of positive when it comes to talking about what a government's doing. But I thought that there was some validity in what I was hearing, and it became obvious to me that if I was willing to listen to these complaints and I was willing to share, I guess some evidence that the complaints are true, that I need to try to do something about it. Therefore, I need to run for mayor. I had been alderman for 4 years, and somebody asked if I ever was going to run for alderman again. I said, if I'm going to run for office, it's going to be for an office that can actually have an impact. Because alderman, you're one of 13 members of the board.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor, you're running it day to day.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that transition from alderman to mayor, because there was a bit of a transition there, wasn't there, from alderman to mayor?
Yeah. So it's 10 years. The people of Ward 2 decided that my 4 years were enough. But it was helpful, though, that I understood that I made some mistakes while I was alderman, and that I didn't quite move about some actions as patiently as I should have. And it's a whole different world to become mayor. And there's a lot that you want to accomplish. Boy, the patience is it's got to be there, and understanding the relationships and understanding the other people involved. It was eye opening to me. Those 4 years as an alderman, and then the 10 years that I had off.
Wow, yeah.
What were some of those first lessons that you learned in there when you started to learn how to affect change? To work through the proper channels.
Probably some of the first lessons I learned there was that I needed to share more of the responsibility. So, in the best example that I'll give you with that is that in some cities and some mayors, the mayors really set the agenda for their committees, and they really set the agenda for the staff. And I relaxed that a little bit. I told the committee chairman, "You're the chairman. You set the agenda. You can decide if you want to cancel your meetings. You can decide if you want to hold special meetings." And I gave them more opportunities to interact with the staff. And I think that's paid off. Obviously, there are going to be some pitfalls in there, but I think it's paid off.
So I've served on a couple, the committee. Working with BOMA was really good and a lot of fun. Got some slack on the outside for some things, but talk to us about how you handle that on a day-to-day basis. The constant nagging from the outsiders that have no clue what's going on the inside, but yet they blame you for everything.
So those 10 years off and working in community relations really, really helped. I have to remember that the person who complained today is not the same people who complained last week. So this person, it might be their first interaction with me or first interaction with city government, and a lot of times they just don't know. And typically they're being respectful, even though I'm annoyed the fact that I've had to answer this question 5 times in the past week. So I just sort of have to step back, and fortunately with my background in writing, I think I have a pretty good grasp on wording and how tone can come across in an email. So it definitely takes a little bit of patience and takes a little bit of understanding to deal with. That's for sure.
So in 2016, you ran for mayor, a very successful race, and I asked you what you contribute to your success, and you said canvassing. You knocked on 8,000 doors.
I did.
So talk to us about that. Had that been done before? Do you know if that had been done before? Is that a lot? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I don't think any candidate for mayor had ever knocked on that many doors in Hendersonville. I had worked for Diane Black when she ran for state representative and for state senate, and that was sort of the basis of her candidacy in those races. And it gives the voter an opportunity to really see you as a human. It's not a mail piece. It's not a phone call. It's not an email. It's a real human standing at your door. So but it takes time, and I think that's why a lot of people shy away from it. I am very much an introvert. That first door is the hardest, but it made the difference. I also say that what made the difference is that I have a sister that's owned Baskin-Robbins for 25 years and another sister that has taught dance at American Academy of Dance for 25 years. So I ran into so many people when I was knocking on doors that said, I know your sister. I have a third sister that's been here for a long time. So whenever anybody said, I know your sister, I had to ask which one. And so that was already a connection that I had with so many people that I didn't know. But knocking on their door and seeing this person they had heard about, or Teresa's brother, Patty's brother, or Renee's brother, it made it real for them. And I think that was the difference. There were 4 people in that race. I spent the second most, and I won.
So canvassing 8,000 doors. How many is that a day? So break that down, because so this is a business podcast, and we bring in local business and leaders. But we also are in sales, so you got to think how many calls I got to make that one sale. So 8,000. So break that down daily.
So I tell people, your question is very interesting, because I tell people that the secret to winning a local election is being nice and doing math. And so it's standing at somebody's door and being nice to them when they come to the door. What they want more than anything else is they want you off their porch. Some of them want to engage, but for the most part, they want you off their porch. And what you want is you want to engage with them and then get to the next person. So I could typically knock about 20 houses per hour. Now, that means that I'm probably only going to engage with 4 or 5 people, because it's usually between 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 that come to their door. And most people, they just appreciate the opportunity to meet you, but then they want you off the front porch. So if you're not 20 an hour and you're thinking, okay, most days I could go out for at least 3 or 4 hours. If I couldn't go out for 3 or 4 hours, it almost made sense to go do something else. So if you do that for 3 or 4 hours, I had it mapped out that I could hit 4,000 by this date, 5,000 by this date, 6,000 by this date. What constantly happens, though, is you end up talking to somebody longer than you should. Sometimes it's just hard to disengage, but you also end up staying out longer than you had intended, and that's okay, because then you're just meeting more people. Like I said, the first one is the hardest. After that, you sort of get in a groove. You just go knock on the next door.
Yeah, wow.
I assume when you're walking in, going into the election, you have in your mind like what Hendersonville needs. After you're talking to this many people, was there something else that needed that you didn't know as people are talking to you? Like, oh, this is what's wrong with it, and you're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, now this is going to make a difference.
Absolutely, and a lot of times the issue of the day was temporary. It was something involving police for a little while. I remember that sometimes when I was knocking on doors for about 6 weeks or so, there was something going on with animal control, and I never quite figured out what it was. But sometimes it's just as simple as their road out front of them is in bad shape. And so you've got to be ready to adjust and understand, what it is that people want to tell you about. Very rarely after I introduce myself and say much more do they really want to hear more from me. They want to talk to me. That's fine.
Yeah.
So, and I'd always take notes as what was important to them, and then look over those notes after every couple of days. Say, okay, is there a trend here? Is there something I need to get up to speed on?
Yeah.
So, Mayor, that starts to speak to a question that I had. How do you start to prioritize some of those things? Because our own issues are the most important to us as individuals, right? But you're dealing with thousands and thousands of individuals that voice their opinion. So, whatever you can speak to, whether it's your philosophy on that or the city's philosophy, how do you prioritize those things?
It's very difficult.
I'm sure.
I do my best to prioritize investing over spending. That's sort of one rule of thumb. It's incredibly difficult. Just like you said, that what is a priority to some people may not be to others. And it's that problem is made worse by the fact that when somebody asks about their road, they're not paying for that road. So you have a lot of people whose roads are in good shape, or the park they go to is in good shape, but they'd like it to be in better shape, or they have a small drainage problem. They'd like it to be fixed. So the problem with what you just mentioned is even worsened when everybody knows that somebody else is paying for it. I've been very clear of my priorities when I was elected in 2016, and the top 3 really haven't changed. It's enhancing the image of Hendersonville, it's improving the infrastructure, and it's bringing more professional jobs to Hendersonville. There are another 50 after that, but those are the top 3. And I think stating those many, many times has probably helped me. However, I still get the email where somebody says, you're not doing enough on fill in the blank.
So when you say investing over spending, and then you couple that with bringing new opportunities to Hendersonville, I mean, that speaks more to the investing side.
Right.
That's what you mean by an investment over a cost, so to speak, that doesn't bear a return.
Right, but it also means it also means spending more on roads and probably even police cars and probably drainage problems than on sending out sandbags or the fire department to pump out somebody's basement.
Gotcha.
I will say, so I grew up in Detroit. and I was back there over the summer. And if anybody complains about the roads here, go up there and run around for a couple days because it's nothing compared up there. So,
So I was in
second
western
that.
Minnesota a couple weeks ago. I was out bike riding there, and yeah, the roads are awful.
Yeah.
Just absolutely awful.
you
And
come
part
back
of
here and it's smooth sailing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something in there about bringing in business, and we're all business owners here, or in finances or banking or whatever. Talk to us a little bit about what your vision is for bringing in more business into Hendersonville, and does Hendersonville have the growth to support that infrastructure and the growth to support that?
Absolutely. And one of the things I think people forget is that we have a lot of people that live in Hendersonville that are driving outside of Sunbury County for their jobs. So it's not like we have to, if we ended up with a business that needed to hire 200, 300 people, they don't have to bring in 150 people. We already have those people here. It's just that they're working out of town. I tell the story many times that we had a law firm that opened up in Hendersonville just about 3 years ago. Before they finished building the building, the lead attorney there had several resumes from people who lived in Hendersonville but were working in Nashville. And he didn't even have to pay them as much as if they were working in Nashville because those people got an hour back of their life
2
at
hours
least.
a day.
At least because now they're working in Hendersonville. I've got a good friend whose wife worked for Vanderbilt Hospital, and she used to travel down to 100 Oaks. When they opened up here, her commute went from 45 minutes to about 5 minutes. And so it's those opportunities I think that we need to take advantage of, especially in healthcare. What it comes down to is I want to find jobs. I want to bring jobs to Hendersonville for people who live in Hendersonville. Most of those are professional level jobs, and we've done very, very well, especially in healthcare. But we've also done well with some restaurants. We've done well with retailers. Costco's coming here. And I have a friend in my neighborhood that works at Costco and has to travel to West Nashville. And he says, absolutely, I'm going to be working in Hendersonville. So it's reaching out really to those employers that need people who have the skills that already live in Hendersonville.
That's awesome. I mean, I worked downtown until the pandemic, so I'm going to assume that a lot of people didn't realize how bad that commute really is until you don't have to do it for a year. But now I'm able to work from home, so now I can, eat local restaurants like you've always said, but not knowing how much flexibility you have being at home working in Hendersonville is huge. So I think more people able to do that with the job opportunities there is key.
Well, what it also does, exactly what you mentioned, is now you're eating at more local restaurants. So we have people that if we have their jobs here, they're more likely to go to lunch at a Hendersonville restaurant. They're also more likely to spend time with their kids at school or coach their kids' soccer teams or baseball teams, that kind of thing. So the whole quality of life gets better here, as well as local sales for restaurants and retailers get better, which means that we then bring in more sales tax. So people like you are helping us out.
And that's what a lot of restaurants and retailers look at is like the daytime population, correct? So to your point, if they're staying here.
Yes. Smart ones do. We have had some that have come in here and that look at the demographics of Hendersonville, say this is a perfect place for us. And then they open up for lunch and it's almost crickets and they don't quite get it. And they're having to come to terms with the fact that what Hendersonville has for dinner is not what we have for lunch. So that has been an adjustment for some, but we have done very well with restaurants. But certainly, without a doubt, a lot of that has to do with the Eat Hendersonville movement of Mauricio Sanchez and the Hendersonville Chamber of Commerce with Kathleen Hawkins and the Thrive in 37075. People are understanding, and it goes along with a national wave of spending your money locally. That's very helpful to us.
Once again, the pandemic, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to that, right? So you didn't realize as you go through that you're not helping your city that you live in until you see them struggling through the pandemic. And how do you help them? Just buy and eat locally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big.
That's awesome.
So talk to us a little bit about that 2020 election. Was there a moment where you said, I am not running for re-election?
So there actually was, and it was Valentine's Day 2020. It was just a tough day, and I had a difficult board back then with some of the aldermen that we had, and and I just sort of thought, is this really what I want to put myself through? But then I reminded myself the reason that I ran in 2016 it was that I love this city. I'm emotionally invested in this city. I'm invested in so many other ways in this city, and that I feel like I'm the best person to run this city. And so yes, that doubt lasted a little while.
Talk to us a little bit about how you changed as a leader, how you feel like you've grown as a leader since 2016 to now, 2022.
So I certainly feel like we have a staff that I am able to reach out to more, but it's more corroboration than it was before. And part of that has to do with when you inherit folks, you've got to get to know them a little better, and you've got to develop some trust with them. When you hire folks, it sort of moves faster, and that has certainly helped. Is that the input that I take from them and the outreach that I do with them is much greater than it was in 2016.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You feel like you're, I guess, growing with the people you've been building that trust. There's a big trust factor there.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I'd like to know a little bit about what your ideas are for the future of the city going forward. You know, what are some developments and things that are coming down the pipe that you're really excited about?
So I'm very excited about Costco. We have a lot of people in Hendersonville that are traveling outside of Hendersonville to go to Costco. And we think that the impact on sales tax will be about $2 million per year.
And that's big for
yes, it is.
For Hendersonville.
Perspective is we generated about 18.3 this past year. So when Costco gets to 5 years, we think that impact will be about $2 million per year. So that's one area that I look down the road that I see some positive developments coming out. Music City Studios, we look forward to that opening over close to Free Hill Business Park. We look forward to some of the road improvements we're going to make, because if you're expecting people to spend more time in Hendersonville and work here, you got to help them get around. And so what the state is doing at Walton Ferry Road and Gallatin Road, the traffic signal synchronization, which is going on for a long, long time, we're going to begin construction.
That's part of DDOT, right?
It is.
Okay.
It is. And we see that construction beginning pretty soon. The greenway that we're going to have on Sanders Ferry Road, right next to Sanders Ferry Road, that's huge. It just, to me, it says a lot about quality of life, but it also says not only would somebody want to live here, they'd want to have their business here. So that certainly helps, as well as what we've got going on out by Saundersville Road, by Vietnam Veterans Boulevard. We've had a couple businesses open there, but it keeps sort of the focus as people drive by on Vietnam Veterans Boulevard to say, okay, that's a business-friendly area right there. We want to make sure people understand that. We absolutely want to reach out to restaurants and retailers and encourage them to be here, but we don't incentivize them at all, and this is why. Professional employers, office space, we're going to go out there all day and try to get them here. But restaurants and retailers, they're sort of going to have to make their own way, and the reason for that is because we have so many right now. When we bring in another restaurant to Hendersonville, another restaurant opens up in Hendersonville, we find that they end up attracting the employees from other restaurants. And really, they're not increasing the size of the pie when it comes to overall sales in Hendersonville. They're just splitting it in one more slice.
They're just diversifying.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. We do have some restaurants that have come here during the pandemic because they see this as a nice spot to be. And those are really destination restaurants. We encourage the heck out of those because they're going to bring people in from outside Hendersonville. Retailers, it's tough, especially when it comes to hiring. We don't really want somebody coming into Hendersonville that's going to put a current business out of business if they're just selling the same thing. We are going to welcome anybody who comes here. I'm going to go to the ribbon cuttings and I'm going to shop there. But we're not out there incentivizing restaurants and retailers.
I tell you, the biggest thing I'm excited about is the roundabout beside Sam's Club. That's going to be huge. Did you guys know about that?
Synchronization sounds pretty good too.
Oh yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting stuff. But a roundabout, now that's really exciting.
That will actually probably be the second roundabout. The first one is one that we should start construction on sometime in the next 6 months, close to Durham Farms, because there's a sort of a 5-way intersection right there.
That is the worst. Are you talking about the one at New Shackle?
Let's see. It's if you stay on Indian Lake Boulevard and run into Durham Farms, and you've got a stream running through there, and you have 5 accesses. It's messy.
Yeah, that's tight through there.
A bit messy.
I live in Durham Farms, so that's getting in and out of that place. And if it rains, forget about it. You're not going down that road at all.
We'll see if Hendersonville knows how to navigate a roundabout, though.
Yeah,
because there's some residents that probably have never done that before, and I've heard people say like, when you see that for the first time, it's pretty intimidating. Yeah. But we'll figure it out.
So I ride my bike through Durham Farms all the time, and I keep trying to imagine what is this going to look like with a roundabout. So.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about. So this is more of a business leadership kind of mindset podcast. Is there anything that you do daily to really set your mindset to having to deal with maybe the public, or maybe not deal with is a good word, but having that mindset going into how I'm going to speak and how I'm going to communicate with not only the public, because you're at a ribbon cutting almost every day, weekly, you're at an event. Is there something that engages you to get your mindset wrapped around that communication?
It's probably two things, and they're on different ends of the spectrum. One is I over prepare for every time I'm going to be speaking publicly. For this podcast, I was here 30 minutes early, and I already had some idea of what your questions were and had some ideas, sort of some bullet points. I do that when I'm going to be interviewed on TV with one of the local TV stations, but also the State of the City address that I give at the chamber. I spend 4 months preparing for that, and it is incredibly stressful to me. And to me, a lot of it just comes down to preparation and knowing your audience and making sure that you can deliver some meat. Don't just get up there and talk like any other government official. Give them some details. For the State of the City address, I always make sure that it's slightly entertaining, but it also has some details in there. The other end of the spectrum, I dress like I'm the mayor. I think it's important that when I'm out in public, especially outside City Hall, that I wear a coat and tie. And that's something that I pledged when I came into office, and even ribbon cuttings when it's 95 degrees and high humidity, this is what I look like, is I'm in a coat and tie. So I think both of those help me when it comes to dealing with public.
I'm sure it can feel like you're on an island sometimes, just, being mayor, being that center of attention, that focal point.
Yeah.
So what do mayors do? I mean, do you guys learn from each other? They're like mayor support groups, coping
Facebook group that
you know what I mean?
on.
Like how do you, whenever you're setting a vision for how you run the city, initiatives for the city, I mean, are there resources that you take advantage of to kind of help you establish those things and keep your mind sharp in those ways?
We do. So it's funny you say that, is that I got off the phone with Paige Brown, mayor of Gallatin, 10 minutes before I headed up here. I talked to Mayor Brown. I talked to Mayor Callis. I talked to Tim Ellis in Goodlettsville. We have a lot of similar issues, and it's nice to have somebody who's going through the same thing you're going through.
Sure.
There is not much scarier to me than standing in a crowd with nobody next to me, because then anybody has the opportunity to come up and ask you about something that you may have no clue about. And it's somewhat intimidating. It is. I'm very much an introvert, and I do my best to always have a kid, my kids with me or somebody that I'm talking to. So at least I have the opportunity to prepare. Maybe it's just a couple seconds when somebody comes to speak to me. But a lot of that, ideally, I will have done by talking to other mayors and sort of knowing what's going on out there, and what they're dealing with is going to be a lot of times what I'm dealing with.
You ever just wear AirPods, and if somebody walks up to you, you just, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm on the phone. I can't talk right now.
I do not do that. The worst part about it is that I have such a terrible memory that I am very poor with names. So very often when somebody asks me, if I remember them, I can place where I met them or how I know them, what the connection is. But I do poorly other than that. So my message being that if you see me somewhere and I can't remember your name, it's not you.
It's not a you thing.
I think that just makes you human. A lot of people, I think you're speaking for a lot of people there, Mayor.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to be a mayor is knowing who I know.
I'm sure. Yeah, you meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned a bike a lot. Are you? I'm assuming you're a bike rider. What kind of bike riding do you do?
So I'm a road cyclist. There are some people that ride toys. Those people are mountain bikers. And I'm sure some people are out there listening to this right now. Yeah. And what they're going to do is they're going to make fun of me being in spandex. That's okay. Because we've had those debates for a long, long time. But I like speed. And so ever since I was a kid, growing up with three sisters, I wanted to go where they weren't. So I got on a bike. They rode horses. So I rode a bike. And I still ride bikes. So during college and after college, I used to go on one big trip per summer. And usually that was 4, 5, or 6 days. After some time of doing that, I realized that I had ridden most of the way across Tennessee through a couple other states and thought, well, if we tie all these together with future trips, I can make it from the Atlantic to the Pacific and from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. So I did. So I kept taking off on summers for 4, 5, 6 days and adding different segments. And I think in 2016 or 2017, I finished east-west, and I think 2018 I finished north-south. So I've ridden from my house to the Gulf, to Canada, to the Atlantic, to the Pacific. A friend of mine who is not a good friend said, well, you actually haven't been to that many states. So I figured it out, and it was only 17 states. So now what I'm trying to do is connect those routes that I previously finished, connect those routes to the states that I have not ridden to. So at this point, I can say I've ridden to 31 states from my front door. We're going to work on the other ones, and that'll just take some time. I just got back from Minnesota. I reached South Dakota and North Dakota, and then rode through Indiana and made it to Michigan and Ohio.
That's cool. Is there a love for travel mixed in there,
There is.
somewhere combined
There
with
is.
a passion for biking?
There is, and honestly, that's sort of my happy place, is being on my bike for hours and hours at a time. You can solve the world's problems, and you sort of, for some people, they want to go sit in a cabin in the middle of the woods. So sort of that sense of adventure is part of it, and that I am accomplishing something, but at the same time, I'm removed from some of the noise.
You spend a lot of time thinking about, politics or government or what some things that you could structurally change. Does that come up a lot when you're biking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Is when I was in Minnesota, and I was 4 days there. 2 of those 90+ miles, and riding through some of the smaller cities, I noticed that every small city out there seems to have some sort of art, some sort of art on their bridges and their overpasses. Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
We've got 2 major bridges in both ends of the city. So you start to think, okay, so what does it take to do that? Well, obviously they're owned by TDOT, so we'd have to work through them. We have a beautiful Hendersonville organization that's just started up. We have an arts council. It's something that I would want to talk to them about, get their thoughts. I am the worst person when it comes to any sort of graphic art, but I think that I can pull some folks together to discuss this idea and see if it's something that we should pursue. So I spent a good 2 days thinking on that.
Let's give a few of the right kids a can of spray paint, man. They can take it. I thought we were talking about graffiti at first.
And just to see the different types of decoration, really is what it was in different cities. It was interesting. Some was very simple, but some was very complex. And thinking, why can't we do that?
Yeah,
That's
I think that'd be
awesome.
cool.
So I'm not a biker. So you're planning out, you got like hotels that you're staying at through this, and this is all mapped out ahead of time, or you just like go for it and then wherever you get?
Yeah, and that's exactly. So I do map it out ahead of time, and I don't camp because after 80, 90 miles, I want to be in a bed, and I want something to do. You also want to shower. But so years and years ago, I did a bike ride across Missouri, and I had it mapped out, but I wasn't sure where I would stop because I just figured I'll just ride until I get tired that day. I had ridden about 80, maybe 85, 90 miles that day, and I pulled up to a hotel that had just a small hotel in probably a city that fewer than 10,000 people. And I asked them what the cost was to stay that night. And they said, we don't have anything available.
Oh, no.
So if I were on the other side of that counter, I probably would have said the same thing. So, faced with salt marks on it, completely sweaty, a little bit of grease on my fingernails, and a shirt that is stinky from a couple of days riding, you can understand. So now instead of asking, do you have space for me, I let people know when I come up, so I have a reservation here. so yeah, it definitely makes a difference. So I map it out way ahead of time. And sometimes, ideally, I'd ride 75 to 80 miles a day. But sometimes you have to go farther, sometimes you have to go less, just based on where the hotels are. A couple years ago, I did 95 miles in a day, which is not really what I want to do. But that's where the next hotel was.
So do you try to stay on the flatland, or do you seek out some challenge like Colorado, or where you try to go through?
We did Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, so that's what a 7,000 elevation.
And I did Estes Park. I went up from Granby to over the Rockies down to Estes Park. That was the hardest day of bike riding. So in North Carolina has been hard too, up the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Blue Ridge Parkway.
But coming down is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
There's your speed.
Yeah.
I
So
think Grandfather Mountain might be 10,000 square feet. It's a lot.
So when I got to about 8,000 that day in Colorado, it was hard for me to push down the pedals. I walked approximately the last 6 miles, and part of that also was that I was getting dizzy. I didn't really want to ride off the road because off the road doesn't stop.
The elevation.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But once I came down, it felt wonderful. So, but Indiana and Minnesota, very, very flat. I hit some storms in Indiana, and I'm looking around through these soybean fields, and I'm thinking, I am the highest thing out here right now.
It's not a good place to be.
Not when you see some dark skies and hear thunder.
That's funny.
A little ominous.
So what's your favorite state to go through at this point? Like looking back.
So I've actually been to every state, but I've only ridden my bike to 31 of them. Montana and North Carolina. So after Alaska and Hawaii, Montana and North Carolina are the most beautiful states. North Carolina just has everything. And I've been all over North Carolina. But Montana, just traveling through that, it's huge. And it's a neat place. There are certainly pockets of other states. Tennessee is a beautiful state as well. If you think of everything we have, with the rivers we have wandering through the state, as well as the mountains on the east, And I'm a mountain person. I'm not a beach person at all. So yes, I sort of rank them in that order.
That's awesome. So I do have another question to ask, and forgive me if I've seen you walking in the wrong car, but do you have a Green Bay Packers license plate on your car?
So yeah,
Yes, I'm a Packer fan, by the way.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Oh.
So
I've been waiting to ask him that for a long time, so I'm glad
We
I
can
got that
bleep
off my
this out.
chest.
Just go ahead, Brian.
So I was born in Wisconsin, lived there till I was 5, lived in Hendersonville for 48 years. But my dad was always a Packers fan. You know, it's hard to buy things for your dads. So we'd always buy him a Green Bay Packers jacket or a license plate or socks or tie or something like that. And that was pretty much our go-to gift. My dad couldn't drive as of about 5 or 6 years ago. And so I bought his truck from him, and he had a white pickup truck. It's like, I think a 1991 pickup truck. And I already had a truck. I already had a car. I didn't really need the truck, but I thought, well, I might need it. And so I had his truck for a little while. And then when he passed away and I decided to get rid of his truck, partially because it wasn't moving anymore, my son said, what are you going to do with the license plate? I said, wow, Zach, that's a very good question. He said, why don't you put it on your car? So that's how I have a Green Bay license plate.
There it
Green
is.
Bay Packer license plate on my car.
Dad, that's great.
So, yeah,
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
like
I'm glad
that.
you noticed that, Dennis.
Bonus points awarded.
Yeah,
There you go.
absolutely.
Oh, the old
Absolutely.
bonus points.
So you went from kind of going back when you said that. So 5 years in Wisconsin, you come here right to Hendersonville.
Exactly.
What was the reason for your family coming here?
So my dad worked at Oscar Mayer, and so he took a transfer from Madison, Wisconsin to Goodlettsville, which is where the plant was, which is I think now the Tyson plant. No, I think it's Tyson. And there are a lot of folks that were sort of in the same boat as we were that moved from Illinois or Iowa or Wisconsin to this new plant down here, opened in 1972. And my dad was friends and coworkers with some of those people that moved down here. And sort of I describe it as a great migration to the suburbs into Hendersonville back then, the 60s and 70s. And there's just a lot of folks from the Midwest that moved down during that time. And that's sort of how Hendersonville grew in the 1970s. And Hendersonville was the fastest growing city in the country in the 1970s. So that's how we got here, and that's sort of how Hendersonville grew. We were like so many other people that were moving to Hendersonville, is that they were sent south, and they weren't going to move to the big city. They were going to move to a suburb.
Interesting. What was Hendersonville before that then? Before all these people, just nothing?
So if you think of what the Cottontown is today. So you know where Cottontown is. You know there's some houses out there. There's a couple subdivisions. That was Hendersonville, 1960. So
And you wrote the book on Hendersonville, by the way. So if anybody's listening, Mayor Clary wrote the book on Hendersonville, so he knows what he's talking about.
So yeah, it was a very, very small place. And what happened was it was just a farming community at Walton Ferry Road and New Shackle and Gallatin Road until the dam happened. And that happened 1952 to 1957. And so then all these people that had seen Hendersonville traveling from Nashville to Gallatin to Nashville, or had been here because they had a farmhouse out here, or because they're a music executive that had some extra property out here, all those people started to think we could live out there. And at the same time, you had the Great Society and the shift to the Sun Belt that was happening nationwide, where people were moving south, moving west, and they're moving to suburbs. And so that reason Hendersonville did what it did.
And then June and Johnny Cash moved
That
out
helped.
here, and that kind of ruined everything for us. Everybody started moving here. One question I wanted to ask you was, you got elected mayor in 2016, and then 4 years later, something kind of big happened to the whole world, and you were the first, you one-term mayor, and COVID hit. I mean, that changed everybody's world, and especially if you were in politics, and especially small-town politics. So talk to us a little bit about what that looked like, for business, government. I mean, everything changed. The whole world flips upside down.
So one of the things that I reminded myself constantly was that I do not have any sort of dominion over businesses in Hendersonville. And I made sure that everybody understood that when somebody said, hey, you need to shut this business down, I let them know. I have no authority to do that. And I got those phone calls. You need to shut down the hair salons. You need to shut down the bowling alley. I have no authority to do that. It really was an odd situation, and the mayors and I have talked about this since, is that a lot of times the phone calls or emails we would get would be, Goodlettsville did this, how come Hendersonville hasn't done it? Gallatin shut down the golf course, how come Hendersonville's golf course is still open? The grocery stores in Nashville are shut down, how come they aren't in Hendersonville? really what happened in probably about 3 or 4 days, probably longer than that, probably about more like 8 or 10, was that it sort of became this goofy race of one-upsmanship. Okay, if Gallatin closed these type of businesses, then Hendersonville's got to close these types of businesses plus one more type of business. And then there was pressure on the next mayor to do something similar. That ended when Governor Lee stepped in and said, here's the deal. I'm going to tell you what's going to be open and what's going to be closed, and I'm going to tell you what's safe and what isn't. That was huge help to us. But at the same time, he left it up to county mayors, which was unprecedented because county mayors typically don't have that type of jurisdiction as far as what businesses would be closed. I was very worried about businesses in Hendersonville because not many of them are well capitalized and could withstand months and months of being closed. It worried me a lot. One of the stories I've told many times was Half Batch Brewery. I know Nate. He's one of the owners and he's the operator there at Half Batch. He was in an odd situation in that the governor decided to allow restaurants to sell beer to take out. The governor said that was okay. Nate's not a restaurant. He's a manufacturer. Nate didn't fit in there. So he was looking at all his competitors being able to provide beer, but he couldn't. He's a small guy. He has a couple investors, but small guy. I probably spent 10 to 12 hours on the phone with some folks with the Craft Beer Association, with the Tennessee, it's the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, with our beer board, trying to figure out what needs to happen so that Nate can continue to compete against grocery stores and restaurants and all those other folks. And this is what it came down to. And like I said, it was a long time on the phone. This is what it came down to, was that we felt comfortable that Nate could sell beer, walk it out to the curb, and deliver it to people as long as they also bought pretzels. And that's what kept him in compliance, and that's what kept him in business. Because it was important to me, like I said, that we look out for those businesses, especially the smaller ones. We have a lot of smaller, we probably have a greater proportion of small businesses in Hendersonville than most communities do.
And now Nate obviously made it out and building a building and being very successful. So, well, that's pretty fascinating. All of us went through that time, and to see what you guys did here in Hendersonville. We moved here in March of 2020, so fantastic time to move. And our daycare never shut down, which was a blessing to us because we were still working.
Mm-hmm.
I was still working, starting a business, and my wife was still working at HCA. So obviously we couldn't go into the building, and there was masks and all those things. Yeah. But it was to see what you guys were doing here, even compared to the state itself. I thoroughly, I thought it was really good. I thought you did a great job with that. Yep.
Appreciate that.
I'm sure Nate appreciated that, and kudos to you for going to bat for him. You know, that's just one example, and kudos, frankly, to all the mayors around here who led during that difficult time. There was no instruction manual for that.
And that was what we were dealing with. It's like, so what do we look back upon to give us some guidance? Didn't exist.
Yeah, wasn't in your book?
Precedent.
No, it wasn't.
Did you major in being a mayor in college? I mean, there's just nothing like that, right?
So I majored in history and government, but I skipped that class that day.
Yeah.
About what do you do in case of a pandemic.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, all right, Mayor, you think you can handle a few speed questions to take us out here?
Let's do it.
Awesome, man. All right. I feel like we've answered this, but anything additional to add on where's your happy place?
Happy place is on my bike on a multi-day bike trip.
Love it. What would you do if you weren't mayor of Hendersonville?
So I tell this to people occasionally, is that when I retire, I'm going to build antiques and write historical documents.
Sounds relaxing.
Who is who's your hero or person you look up to the most?
So we sort of touched on it a little bit. Is teachers during the pandemic. Oh my gosh. I'd say teachers, nurses, and even more so now, dispatchers. Those are the people that I think just really stand out and really are heroes.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm. Most impactful.
Let me add one more.
Please.
And parents of any parents that have more than 2 children. So
I'm right at 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you don't make the cut.
All right.
Sorry, Dennis.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Most impactful book, podcast, things that you do to stay sharp.
I like so a couple books I refer to occasionally. There's one called Irresistible, and it's about the impact of social media. Came out about 2 years ago. Another one, I think it's Raising Successful Children. I think that's what it's called. And that's about the impact of trauma on kids early on. Both are just fascinating.
All right. And lastly, if you had to pick one superpower, what would it be?
To be able to plug in a USB cord without having to flip it upside down and try 2 or 3 times.
Oh, it is.
Feels like like you should have a 50-50 shot at that on the
I
same
know,
way, but
yeah.
it's wrong every time.
Yeah, it's so, and my kids joke about this is that I miss it 110% of the time because a lot of times it turns out I was right the first time, but assumed I was wrong and flipped it over and then had to flip it back over.
That's hilarious. Well, Mayor, we sure appreciate you taking
Thanks,
time
guys.
out of your busy
thank you,
schedule
Mayor. Appreciate it.
to come out here with us today. We appreciate everybody tuning in today. Please do remember to like, subscribe. We'd love to stay connected with you going forward, so find us on social media. And be sure to come out and check out our B3 social events every month. See you guys next time.
Cheers.